This is the bold smile of a man who defied the odds and shook the world of sports, a grin that infuriated oppressors and ignited hope in the hearts of the oppressed. Born into a world that treated him as less than equal, he rose to become the most famous black man of his time. Meet Jack Johnson.
I don't know what he had. Who talked to him? I'm bold. He was crazy.
Jack Johnson, big inspiration because what he did out of the ring, he was so bold. Jack Johnson was a black man back when white people lynched Negroes on weekends. They would send him letters saying, you fighting a white man, and nigger, if you knock him out, we'll kill you. He said, just kill my black buggers, I'm gonna knock this white man cold. And he would knock the white man out.
You liken yourself to him in any way?
They say I'm controversial. They say that I'm bold, but I wasn't nothing like Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson's journey began in Galveston, Texas in 1878. Born to parents who had been enslaved, his early years were marked by the harsh realities of segregation. As a young boy, he endured back-breaking, dangerous jobs for meager wages. These struggles forged his powerful physique and unshakable mental toughness. His fighting career started in brutal battle royals, cruel events where blindfolded black boys fought for the amusement of the wealthy. Time and again, Jack emerged as the last man standing, a glimpse of the champion he was destined to become.
I'm sure he was scarred from his background, but he wasn't humbled by his background. I mean, he had this rebellious spirit.
He was a very aggressive type of individual. He had a rough life.
He started fighting at the age of 13. He had his first professional fight at the age of 16 years.
In those days, a black boxer didn't get the opportunities that a black boxer would get today. And Johnson, in fact, was pushed around, shoved around, as so many great black fighters were in those days.
Just to step inside of a boxing ring takes courage. And then to know that virtually every person there hates you, maybe hates you enough to kill you.
In its early days, boxing was seen as a sport dominated by white men, with black fighters often pushed to the sidelines. The era celebrated brute strength and crude brawlers, but Jack Johnson changed everything. With unmatched skill and undeniable talent, he climbed the ranks, forcing even white fans to take notice. Jack was a master of the sweet science, moving with the grace of a dancer as he toyed with his opponents. Traveling the country, he proved his superiority time and again, dismantling his white challengers with precision and power. Overflowing with confidence that rivaled even Muhammad Ali, Jack Johnson knew he was destined to become the champion.
At 6'1" and 212 pounds, Johnson is lean, hard, a master craftsman who loves to set his own pace.
Some fight experts consider Jack Johnson the perfect fighter, with an almost perfect defense, and he can hit like a ton of bricks. Until it's down, that was a terrific right to the jaw.
Jack Johnson was a half a century ahead of his time. He was the first fighter who thought about self-preservation when he got into the ring. And Jack Johnson was absolutely unique.
For his time, he was a defensive genius.
We see Johnson demonstrate his Morse code prowess by landing a rat-a-tat-tat on Flynn's nose. Jack Johnson now simply holds him off with his left and belts him at will with his right. Fireman Jim seems so confused by what looks like an impenetrable defense.
At his best, he was a superb athlete and considered by many the best defensive fighter in the sport.
Jack Johnson knew when to punch and where to punch.
That he was not satisfied to merely beat his opponent. He had to taunt the man he was fighting.
Moran gets home with 2 good punches. The undaunted Johnson steps back and gives him a hearty round of applause.
Johnson stands off and flicks stinging left jab.
Looks like the champ isn't ready to knock Ketchel out yet. Well, look at Johnson hold Ketchel up.
He attacks ferociously.
The great Stanley Ketchel, the Michigan assassin, is out cold.
Johnson wipes 2 of Ketchel's teeth from his glove.
Jack Johnson learned his craft. He started to get the idea that, maybe he'd like to be heavyweight champion of the world.
From the very start, black fighters were shut out of the heavyweight championship, restricted to the colored title, a rule unspoken but rigidly enforced. Jack Johnson refused to accept this injustice. At the time, the undefeated Jim Jeffries was hailed as white America's hero and the reigning heavyweight champion. Despite Johnson repeatedly challenging him, Jeffries refused to step into the ring, believing the championship was too sacred to be held by a black man.
This fellow Johnson is a fair fighter, but he is a black, and for that reason, I will never fight him.
When there are no white men left to fight, Jeffrey said, I will quit the business.
When Jeffries retired, the heavyweight title was left vacant and quickly claimed by Marvin Hart, only to be taken later by Canadian Tommy Burns. But Burns, like many others, refused to face Jack Johnson, drawing the color line yet again. Johnson, however, was relentless. For 2 years, he chased Burns across the globe, from London to Paris, refusing to let the champion evade him. Finally, in Sydney, Australia, a wealthy promoter offered Burns $30,000 to fight Jack, a sum so significant that refusing it would reveal his fear. Burns had no choice but to step into the ring.
The fight was a sellout. A crowd of 20,000 people, the press and their cameras, gathered to watch the first ever championship fight between black and white.
Within a few seconds, Burns was on the floor. Burns got up and was knocked down again.
The challenger moves the champion around at will. Johnson is having a time of his life.
Jack would let him have 3 shots, even pointing to his ribs. Here, Tommy, now, here.
Johnson merely played with the heavyweight champion. He would laugh and actually talk to the crowd as Burns was hitting to the stomach, laughing all the time. It was Johnson's way of demonstrating he had absolutely nothing to fear from the little heavyweight champion.
As the bell rings, Jack gives a friendly little wave to Burns. See you later, Mr. Tommy.
Johnson was merely toying with the champion, goading him on until the tiring Burns could no longer compete.
So far as damage was concerned, Burns never landed a blow.
He advances on the smaller man, and then suddenly, tiger-like, he attacks.
A good right uppercut, another ripping right uppercut by Johnson. Uppercuts, hooks, all punishing blows.
Now Johnson pours it on. Hooks, uppercuts. Burns is defenseless. At this very moment, the police shut off the cameras and stop the fight.
The world is spared the spectacle of a black man knocking out a white man and denied access to this historical moment.
The end of the white man's domination of the heavyweight championship.
After over 15 years of relentless fighting, Jack Johnson achieved his dream and became a nightmare for white supremacists. He wasn't just the heavyweight champion. He was a global icon with fame, wealth, sharp suits, flashy cars, and the most coveted title in sports. What enraged his critics even more was his open relationships and marriages with white women, defying every societal norm of the time. But Jack didn't care about their outrage. If anything, he thrived on it. He didn't seek their approval, nor did he bend to their rules. Jack Johnson lived on his own terms, a fearless, unapologetic free man.
Jack Johnson had to be the bravest man in America. I'm amazed at what he did publicly that many would not dare to do privately.
With the victory, Johnson became bolder than ever, flaunting his title and his women.
The white man's burden had become the white man's master. He loved crossing the color line. He liked doing outrageous things. Jack Johnson loved to be Jack Johnson.
When Johnson was in London, he wore a golden hat and crocodile shoes, and his antics out of the ring made him increasingly unpopular. He spoke his mind and did what he wanted to do.
He was a very controversial man all through his career, Johnson. He was a bit like a sort of Muhammad Ali of his day, I suppose you could say.
Jack Johnson, he's bad. He had to be a bad, bad black man. He put on pretty white neckties and pretty white, and had white women. You know that nigga was bold.
The public did not want a black man to be the heavyweight champion of the world.
A white man must be heavyweight champion. We can't stand the idea of a black being heavyweight champion.
Almost immediately, the call went out for a great white hope.
Never before had a sporting event been such a focus of public interest. The championship battle polarized the nation.
Everybody who was anybody and some people who weren't was there.
Johnson received numerous death threats before the fight, but showed no signs of fear.
When Johnson entered, happy and smiling, cool as ice.
A clash between the two men who are ranked as the greatest heavyweight champions of all time.
The long-awaited fight is at last underway.
Jeffries bears the reputation of being the strongest man ever to enter the ring. Each time he launches an attack, Johnson quickly stifles it. Jeffries is beginning to show frustration, compounded by Johnson's taunts.
Johnson lands a stinging overhand right, a smashing right hand by Johnson is followed by a jolting right uppercut. Johnson has slowly but methodically worn Jeffries down with hard right uppercuts and the clinches, and powerful lefts and rights to the body.
By round 15, Jeffries was bleeding and swollen. Johnson had victory at hand.
A vicious uppercut and three stinging lefts. Jeffries goes down.
The former champion slumps like a tired old man, but gamely attempts to get up. Referee Tex Rickard holds Johnson away, but Jack smashes Jeffries through the ropes.
One of the most unusual incidents in heavyweight history, as the Jeffries corner and some of the media at ringside actually helped the former champion back on his feet.
And here we go right here, Johnson showing the mark of a great champion, finishing off his opponent.
The champion drives him across the ring, flattens him for the third time.
He who had never been knocked down was knocked down repeatedly.
Nobody cheered. People filtered out of the stadium as if it was a wake, as if they were mourning the passing of something, which they were.
There were shootings, there were race riots, there were many deaths, there were many injuries.
This was a time of violently emotional reactions to racial relations.
This is open race warfare throughout every section of America.
Unable to defeat Johnson in the ring, his enemies targeted him outside it. He was hit with a federal indictment, accused of transporting white women across state lines for immoral purposes, a flimsy and racially charged accusation.
The Attorney General of America, who was first approached to use this against Jack Johnson, he understood, we can't do this. This is a travesty. I think Jack Johnson's reaction initially was, the man's after me again. I can deal with it. If I put money in enough palms, this too will pass.
In just 2 hours, an all-white jury convicted Jack Johnson, sentencing him to a year and a day in federal prison. To avoid incarceration, Johnson fled the country. Over the next 5 years, living in exile, he fought only 5 times, his finances dwindling and his skills beginning to fade. Meanwhile, white America's relentless search for a great white hope led them to the towering Potawatomi giant, Jess Willard. The two met in Havana, Cuba in 1915. At 37, out of shape and past his prime, Johnson faced a crowd eager to finally witness his defeat.
He tries for a knockout in the first 8 rounds and throws everything he has at Willard. Willard is cut, Willard is red, Willard is beaten, and Willard doesn't move a step. He just takes everything. After the 8th round, Johnson's strength, stamina, which was always great, begins to seep out.
The spring in Johnson's legs is gone. It is brutally hot. The sun is insidious. Willard keeps his distance with his great reach advantage.
And towards the middle round, about the 15th, it now becomes Willard who's pushing forward.
Willard is watching closely, realizing that his chance to reverse the momentum of the fight may come shortly. Suddenly, Jess lashes out with a ponderous right. Johnson goes down.
It's happened. The crowd roars his approval.
The impossible had come true. The search for the great white hope was over. Jack Johnson had been dethroned.
The partisan crowd goes wild.
After 7 years, Jack Johnson's legendary reign came to an end. Returning to America, he accepted the law's punishment and served his sentence without protest. Even after his loss to Willard, Johnson's fighting spirit endured. He continued boxing for another 16 years and performed in exhibitions until his final days. In his time, he was a figure who haunted the fears of many, but today his legacy inspires countless others to rise above adversity. Despite a life filled with pain, prejudice, and relentless battles, Jack Johnson never lost his pride. He lived boldly, unapologetically, and without fear.
No question, the man had a stormy life, and in many ways a tragic life.
Jack Johnson deserves his place among the boxing greats.
He beat everyone in his time. That's all a person can be called upon to do.
Jack Johnson, unquestionably, is one of the great heavyweight champions of all time.
That Jack Johnson came along much too soon and perhaps generations ahead of his time.
I should not be here, but I am here. I want to do something good. And out of doing that something good, something will come good to me.
Thanks for joining me on this journey through the life of Jack Johnson. He was more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of strength, courage, and standing up for what's right. His story reminds us to keep pushing forward, no matter the challenges. Let's take inspiration from his legacy and strive to live boldly, just like he did. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay woke. See you in the next one.